Welcome to the Biscuit Book Club on Joy 620 WRJZ, featuring Marcy and Shelley. Today, conversation will build you up in the faith and encourage you to do what God has called you to do. Brought to you by Simplify Hauling. And now, let's go to the studio with Marcy.
Welcome to the Biscuit Book Club, y'all. We're serving up stories with Southern charm. I'm Shelley.
And I'm Marcy, so go ahead and grab a cup of coffee and a biscuit or whatever your heart's desire is, and join us as we sit around the table and talk about books, biscuits, and, everything in between.
What'd you bring to the studio this morning, Marcy? Something yummy, I bet.
Well, yesterday was my big biscuit making day, so I did bring biscuits in and some homemade strawberry jam. So I was kind of light on what I was bringing, but I have a friend coming for dinner tonight, and she just moved from Arizona. Her name's Corey Lynn. She just moved from Arizona to Tennessee, so she's coming over for dinner, and I am doing it's kind of like a double blessing for me. I'm going to be making a recipe that I haven't made, but I'm doing a photo shoot of tomato soup with homemade croutons. And so I made bread this morning so that I could make the homemade croutons. So I felt bad to not bring a little bit of that in because it was so good. Our house smells so good. I'm surprised our neighbors don't come over more often and just say, hey, can we borrow something? Because I can smell the bread from the road. It smelled so good. So.
For a cup of sugar.
Yeah. So
will that recipe be in your magazine, the Christian Writers Magazine?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the recipe is going to be in the next edition of the Christian Writer Magazine. Cynthia Rugdi is going to be on the cover, and she was one of our favorite guests. I just had a wonderful conversation with her the other day again, and I'll be doing all things. It's going to be the comfort edition, so I'm doing soups, breads, crackers, and for dessert tonight we're having a pear crumble with a homemade Greek yogurt honey thyme sauce. So I'm very excited about that. But anyway, yeah, when you come, I'll make you that. I'll make you something like that.
That would be great. I'm excited. It's right around the corner.
I just love having new friends that you get to meet and friends that you haven't seen for a while. I think there's something so important about gathering. And I love it, Shelley, that you have, we kind of run in different writing circles. Like I am more of an article writer, so I know a lot more people who write in that industry. But you are a fiction writer, and you have met a lot of interesting people through ACFW and in your fiction. So you have somebody today that we're going to talk about. How did you meet our guest?
Yes, we're going to give Clint Hall a phone call here in a minute. And we met at ACFW, but my book club here in Alaska, we read his book, his debut book, Still Fire from the Gods, and one of the girls picked it. Well, I'll just tell you, I don't usually read that genre, but I loved it. So when we were just kind of in a circle at ACFW, and I don't know how I ended up finding out he was the author of the book we've read. So that's how we met. And I just wanted to have him on the show. He's had such his book was nominated for a Carol Award that night. And he's just such an humble person. And to be honest, his writing voice reminds me of Suzanne Collins, the Hunger Games author. And
go ahead.
He's just a really neat person and has a beautiful family. I think they have 2 little boys.
Well, and because I had not heard of him, I don't read in that genre, but I do appreciate people who can write in that genre because it is a different style of writing. But I really enjoyed his podcast. I really appreciated I listened to the one that he just dropped in August, but then also I'm listening to one that he had a guest on, and it was just a great conversation with her. It really helped me to see other authors' journey in the writing experience. But then also the one that he dropped in August was really, well, that's probably something we should talk to him about in person so that our listeners can listen in on that.
And his podcast is The Experience, Conversations with Creatives. So be sure and check that out. But yeah, let's just give him a call.
Okay, let's do it. Hopefully he's home. He might be busy writing. Or chasing those 2 little boys. Or 3.
Hello, this is Clint.
Hey, Clint. How are you? It's Shelley and Marcy from the Biscuit Book Club. Welcome.
Oh, hey, Shelley, Marcy. How y'all doing?
Hey, we're doing great, Clint. We're so excited that we can talk to you on the show today. Shelley's told me a lot about your writing and just how fun it was to sit with you at the ACFW, and just super excited about what you have coming on. And as new podcasters ourselves, we are in awe of people who've been doing it longer than we have.
Yes. About 3 years now, Clint?
About 3 years, I think. Yeah, I actually just kind of realized the other day that I do think it's been about 3 years, but it's weird. It's something that I've wanted to do forever. I've always loved podcasts. I like long-form conversations. So for us, it was a thing. We have 2 little boys. So I kind of made myself wait until they were old enough that sort of the time would free up a little bit. And then as soon as it did, I went ahead and launched the podcast. So it's been going ever since.
That's great. Well,
really.
Shelley is the one who asked me if I wanted to do a podcast, but it's a lot of work. It was a lot of work for us, but maybe you were more tech savvy. But what is something that you would recommend for newer podcasters really quick?
You know, just here's actually my thing is I think you have to. I have a lot of people who come to me talking about doing podcasts, and I think they're viewing it as a means to an end, which is to say a lot of them are authors, right? And they're looking at it as a way of platform building. And podcasting can be a fantastic way to build your platform. But I do think, like you said, it's a lot of work. And if you're doing it just to try to then get something else, I kind of usually try to steer people away from it because I don't think you're going to have a great experience, and you'll probably burn out, you know. So personally, for me, the podcast is more of a passion project than anything else. So usually the advice I give people is make sure you like podcasting for the sake of podcasting, you know. And I would actually kind of give the same advice when it comes to writing, when it comes to anything else. I was a musician for a long time, and I was in bands all around the Southeast, and we never really had much success to speak of. But one thing that music taught me how to do that was really valuable to me was how to do something only because I loved it and for no other reason, because we really had no other like external validation, really. No money, no nothing like that. But I didn't care, you know, I loved it. And I think that that's a muscle. Doing something simply because you love it is a muscle that you can develop. So the same has been true for me with podcasting, with writing. So the advice I normally give people is make sure that you love it, because it is a lot of work, and the value needs to be intrinsic, right, rather than something that you think may come as a result of the podcast.
Yeah. Like writing, like you said, you know, most of us have written several novels before we get published. Yep. And to be able to do that, you have to love it. And to sit down at that desk every day and write for the sake of writing because you love it.
But
absolutely.
And I do think, I mean, one of the words that I have heard you mention on the podcast was the word creative. And I think that's a newer word that's kind of bubbled up to the surface. People just thought, oh, you do this or this. But if you are a creative person, you can't not do some things because of passion.
Right. Yeah.
So that sometimes gets creatives into trouble.
How is the podcast going for y'all? Are y'all enjoying it so far?
Well, we kind of came at it a little bit backwards, more maybe unconventional because, and maybe I'll let Shelley share that story because.
Well,
or her part?
Marcy thought I knew what I was doing when I asked her if she wanted to do a podcast together, and I knew nothing. So, Marcy had an opportunity. Her Sunday school teacher is the local radio guy there at Joy Radio, and he had a prime spot open up on Saturday morning at 10:30. So Marcy called me and said, you know what? If we do this radio show, we can just drop it into a podcast. And I was like, that sounds a lot easier for two people that don't know what they're doing.
But you don't need to, though. That is another piece of advice I often give people is don't let perceived barriers like technology, don't let it stop you. Look, you can do an excellent podcast nowadays, recording your voice into your phone. You really can. Now, should you do your best? Of course you should. If you can get better equipment, you should do that if you can figure out how to use it. But you should never let those barriers stop you. If your content is good, and that can be just as simple as having genuine, authentic conversations, people will listen, even if the sound isn't fantastic or the volume goes up and down. Like people will put up with that kind of stuff if the content's good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's great advice too for writers, because I'm sure you hear this as well. Like, oh, I've always thought about, and then they will fill in the blank. I've always thought about writing a children's book for my grandkids, or I've always thought about doing a memoir. And my comment is, then why don't you? Then just do that thing.
Right.
And so there's always people. Some people will have this big long reasons of why they don't do it. But I mean, if you have a book for your grandchildren, a children's book, then how many copies do you possibly need? Like, just go ahead, go to the print, go to a place that does photo books and create that. So anyway, I think that's great advice.
Yes.
Well, and it's amazing. It's amazing how this skill, and this is true for writing, this is true for any creative endeavor. If you just have the courage to get started, all the answers will come to you. So Mr. Rogers called it, like, in the garden of your mind, you plant a seed, and that's all you need. You need a tiny little seed of an idea, and then you think about it and you work on it, and that's like watering it, and it grows. And it grows and it grows and it grows. And before you know it, you've got a thing that you never thought you could do before. But now, just because you had sort of the faith and the courage to step forth and start, these things just start coming together. And by the way, that's the best part. When you start having those sort of epiphanies, people would say the muse, people would say divine intervention. That is the magic. That is absolutely the best part.
Yeah, I love that.
And then the other part of Mr. Rogers was find your helpers. And I think that sometimes we write and we think in an isolated spot, but there's a lot of great mentors out there. I mean, Shelley and I have been, I feel like we are in a three-legged race sometimes. Dragging each other across the finish line sometimes because it'll be overwhelming, and then the other person will feel overwhelmed. It's like, wait, you're feeling overwhelmed? I'm feeling overwhelmed. So I feel like it's kind of to find your helpers, find your tribe, and that's been important.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree.
And Clint, I meant to mention, you just got a 3-book deal with Enclave. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I really appreciate that. I can't talk a lot about it. All I can say, hold on, what am I allowed to say? I'm allowed to say sci-fi trilogy releasing in 2026, or starting in 2026. I think that's all I'm allowed to say, because our marketing director, Tristina, knows all and hears all. And so even I assure you that if I say the wrong thing, her ears will perk up somewhere. And then all of a sudden, like, I'll be getting messages from her. So yes, I think that is all that I'm allowed to say so far, but I'm extremely excited. The team at Enclave is wonderful. I did my first 2 books with them. Every single person who touched my book there made it better, every single one of them. And that's not just the copy, that's also the design, inside and out. I cannot say enough good things about working with them. I am so blessed to be an Enclave author.
That's wonderful. I was telling Marcy, I don't normally read that type of book, but we read your book in our book club, and I just really enjoyed it. And your writing reminds me of Susan Collins. Your writing voice reminds me of Susan Collins, The Hunger Games.
I really appreciate that. What kind of stuff do y'all normally read?
Well, I write women's fiction, so I read a lot of women's fiction.
And I write for Guideposts and World and Ministry Watch. So I'm on the back of toilets across America.
Hey, but listen, that's good real estate right there. If you can lock that down.
Yep.
But you know, it is funny though, because I'll go to when I go to conferences like ACFW, and I tell people that I'm a sci-fi fantasy writer. I mean, for anyone who's been, ACFW especially, is dominated by like women's fiction. But how many of those authors kind of like pull me aside and sort of whisper to me, I love reading sci-fi fantasy. They just don't write it. But there's actually so many people in that community who really do enjoy, a lot of people, we call it spec fic, right? So many people in that community do actually read speculative fiction. So when we're there, it's actually a lot of fun.
Well,
yeah, you didn't expect to have fans there, but you did.
I did not, and that was a welcome surprise.
Well, and it's probably surprising for you to have people say, I don't read anything in that genre. I read more like Lord of the Rings, and you're like, okay, so back in the day, like, was that a real stretch or not?
Yeah, right. But hey, listen, as long as there's some kind of magic in there, right? As long as there's a villain to slay, I'm good with whatever it is that they're reading.
Yeah, right. And in your debut novel, Still Fire from the Gods, I love that title. Set in a post-AI world, AI war world. Sorry, got tongue-tied there. Gunnar, the character's journey, wrestles with loss, faith, and power. I just wanted to know, how did you shape that emotional arc for him?
Oh, yeah. Well, the truth is, I mean, it was a time when I was going through a personal crisis of faith. So, it's fun to talk about Steal Fire from the Gods because, like, of course the hook is, hey, magic robots, AI learns elemental magic and uses that power to overthrow humanity, blah, blah, blah. That's fun, and that is what the book's about. But that's the furniture. Y'all are writers, y'all understand this. The real story is about a character who's undergone a crisis of faith, and it was just something I was thinking about at the time. And sometimes in our lives, I'm speaking to the believers here, right? Sometimes we make choices and things happen, and if we're being honest with ourselves, we like, you know what? This is the consequence of the choice that I made, that I had the free will to make. Mm-hmm. But sometimes, if we're honest with ourselves, things don't go the way that we would have wanted, and we might be looking up at God and be like, look, I'm not perfect, but I didn't deserve this, right? Mm-hmm. And we don't understand. And that's really what this character is. His family, and this is not a spoiler, this is like the first thing you learn about him. His family did everything absolutely the right way. They prayed, they loved, they served, they helped people, they fought against evil, right? And then they got absolutely decimated. And they got decimated by an enemy because the machines have elemental magic. They got decimated by an enemy that in their eyes is wielding the power of God, the God that they love, the God that they serve. And so he's left all by himself, and he's thinking, how could you let this happen? And this is something that I was just sort of going through at the time, and I think, we so many of us will experience certain crises of faith like that. So when I sort of I just believe in writing what you're thinking about personally, right? I don't usually write with a reader in mind. I usually write for myself. And Steal Fire from the Gods was a book that I kind of needed to tell myself. And again, without spoiling anything, what I came to realize is that even though God doesn't, he may not have made that horrible thing happen, and we can debate all that kind of stuff, but he can use it, right? He can take what the enemy meant for evil and turn it for good. And I believe that our deepest wounds, perhaps our greatest shames or our darkest secrets can become our greatest sources of strength, especially when we use those to then help someone else. Mm-hmm. And that is ultimately what the book is about. But it was me teaching myself that. It was the process of writing that book.
Yeah. And I do think that there's something to be said for having sometimes the best, deepest writing does not come from a shallow well. And so,
No.
you know, I just was thinking of the interview you did with, I think her name was Becky, and just how her book was, she had gotten a 2-book contract, and the second one was about divorce, and it was right when hers happened, and just the trauma of it, and how the Lord sometimes the writer's the one who is blessed by the comfort that he gives, and then we can share it with somebody else. So it's almost like that scene in the air, or like when you're on the plane and they say, you know, in the event of low cabin pressure, please adjust your own mask before helping the screaming child next to you. And so that's kind of like what I feel like the Lord does for us. Just takes those pains and makes it so that we can help somebody else after we've helped ourselves.
And something that I realized as I was sort of writing, so you have to write about your story a lot, right? You have to write sort of promotional blogs and that sort of thing. Something that I sort of realized when I was writing about the story was, so something terrible happens, but then God uses it to bring about something good. There's actually 2 blessings there that happen in that sort of a scenario. The first is the good thing that God brought in and of itself, and that's wonderful and that's a miracle. But perhaps the even greater blessing is the second thing, which is the knowledge that whatever just happened could have only happened through the existence of a loving God. And that is perhaps the greater blessing, is that awareness of how could this horrible, terrible thing have possibly turned into this good thing, and realizing that it could have only been sort of through God's existence. And that is something that I cannot pretend like I had in mind when I started writing the book, but by the end of, matter of fact, maybe not even by the end of writing the book, but by the end of sort of writing about the story, I came to realize. So that was something that I thought was really important.
Wow. I love that.
You had mentioned, too, about being a creative person, that you always have something that you're working on while you're writing. And I know for me, I had a canvas, and every time I would write a chapter or work on the Empty Nest book, I would write, and then I would go and paint. So it was kind of neat that by the end of the book, the painting was done, but it was something that was creative. So what are you doing now that's creative that helps you with this 3-book series? That's a lot of writing ahead of you.
Yeah.
It's a lot of, so the good news is, but by the way, hold on, before I answer that question, I'm actually very curious about the painting. Did it reflect the book in any way?
No. I would say probably not. It was just something that I was doing that matched in a way. Now that you say that, I guess it would. It was kind of a new season in our life. We had moved to Southern California. We'd gotten, and I was decorating, and I put some pillows up and some curtains up, and so I made a painting that matched that same design. And so it was kind of a new season, but it definitely was just something that I worked on every day, just the color stroking, you know, the paintbrush, just the sound. And so, I mean, I didn't even care if it didn't look good. Like right now I have it on our screened porch.
That is such a key point.
So, yeah.
I'm sorry, keep going, but I'm coming back to that. That's such a good point.
Yeah. So anyway, it's just something, somebody said, oh, I love that painting. Did you do that? And I'm like, yeah, I did. But, you know, and it just kind of reminded me like, but it was a process. It was a process through the book, and it helped me.
See, what I love about what you just said, I think we all, it is so tempting, especially nowadays, to try to like monetize or get some kind of like social value out of absolutely everything we do, especially everything we create, right? You wrote a song, oh, you should put it out. You should put it online. You did a painting. Be sure that you try to either sell that or post it on your Insta or whatever, you know? And I think it's so important to have some creative things that you do just because you enjoy them. Now, there's nothing. I'm not trying to knock anybody's hustle, right? Do your thing, and if you can make some money off of it or whatever, fine, absolutely, go ahead. But I think it's important for your soul to have those kinds of creative things. Like I love that you said that you didn't really care how it looked. I'm sure it came out wonderful. I bet it actually came out even more wonderful because you weren't so worried about the outcome. Yeah. So for me personally, I'm always doing, frankly, too many creative things. So, you know, a lot of people have the problem of like they start things and they never finish them. My problem is that I start things and I never quit. When I pick something up, I never let it go. Now, I'm very fortunate in that I actually spent about 10 years writing manuscripts before I had my first publishing contract, and a lot of that was before we had kids. I had a lot more time. Now, that was a very frustrating 10 years because, and I promise I'm going to come back to the point here. A lot of that was frustrating because I had felt very called to write for my entire life, and I was finally doing it, and I kept getting slam door in my face after slam door in my face, rejection after rejection, and I had a nightmare agent experience that if anybody ever wants to hear the details of, I put it on my podcast one time. But I just kept going because I loved writing books. So all that to say, you know, Steal Fire from the Gods, I wrote when we only had one kid. And I wrote it in the first year of his life, actually. Echo Nova, which is my second book, I actually wrote before we had any kids. The first two books of my upcoming trilogy were written before Steal Fire from the Gods. I'm working my way back through my catalog is kind of the point that I'm making. And again, the only thing I can say that is sort of divine intervention, which is that, you know, I think God was preparing me for a season in which we would have young kids, but I could still have a publishing career because I did so much work leading up to it. You know, I was preparing this catalog work. So now, you know, my first book doesn't even release until next year, but I'm already deep into edits on my second book. I need to do some edits on it. I'm trimming it down. I've got a highly detailed outline for book 3. So I don't have to necessarily take away time from my family and that kind of stuff, which is just honestly just fantastic. You know, it's such a blessing. So, but in terms of the other creative things that I do, I'm always playing music. I play music for church. That's something I do just because I love it. The podcast is obviously very creative. And then I spend a lot of time in my driveway playing basketball. And that doesn't sound creative, but for me it's an art form. It's just something that I do kind of just to find peace and calm.
Yes. Well, I love that. Well, gosh, I wish we had 30 more minutes. That's the thing about radio shows. We just don't have enough time. But thank you for joining us. We've enjoyed it immensely. And
really quick, where can people find you, Clint?
Yes, super easy to find, just ClintHall.com. That has links to absolutely everything. If you want to find me on Instagram, I am just at Clint Hall, and on Facebook, it's author Clint Hall. But if you just go to ClintHall.com, you'll find links to everything, my books, my podcast, my social, all of that.
Okay. So thank you so much for joining us, Clint Hall, ClintHall.com. And we really enjoyed this conversation with you about your books, your podcast, and staying creative. So until next time, we're just really thankful that you joined us today.
Yes,
thank you so much for having me.
Keep it cozy, y'all. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to today's Biscuit Book Club with Marcy and Shelley. Be listening next week at the same time for great encouragement and a challenge for what God has for your life on the Biscuit Book Club on Joy 620 WRJZ.